British naval force, including container ships, car ferries and cruise liners, as well as the usual warships, steamed the thousands of miles south to try and retake the Falklands, military experts were sceptical about their chances. After all, the sum total of British air power would be 36 Harrier jump jets, an as-yet untried design, based on 2 aircraft carriers, while the Argentines had hundreds of modern jets, some armed with the latest French Exocet anti-ship missiles, on unsinkable land bases within easy striking distance of the islands. American brokered attempts to find a diplomatic solution continued in the meantime, but neither General Galtieri nor Mrs. Thatcher seemed in any mood to compromise or negotiate. Meanwhile, the northeastern US was buried under 2 feet of snow from one of the worst April blizzards in history, and Canada formally gained full political independence from the UK, and the F1 world's attention turned to Paris, as an FIA tribunal ruled on the ongoing tiff over rules interpretations. After having ruled in FOCA's favour in the superlicence case after South Africa, this time the FIA came down in favour of the organisers. Running underweight at any time was unacceptable, whatever the letter of the rules said, and so Nelson Piquet and Keke Rosberg were both retrospectively disqualified from the Brazilian Grand Prix, while perhaps as a gesture to demonstrate neutrality, Ken Tyrrell's protest over Villeneuve's rear wing at Long Beach was upheld, and the Canadian was also disqualified. So, Alain Prost was the new winner in Brazil, with Watson and Mansell promoted to 2nd and 3rd, Alboreto to 4th, Winkelhock getting his first career points in 5th, and Pironi 6th, while Watson was also a beneficiary and Long Beach shuffled up to 6th. All of which meant that Prost and Renault regained the leads of their respective title races. Frustrated, Frank Williams and Bernie Ecclestone announced that they would withdraw from the upcoming San Marino Grand Prix and began to apply pressure to the other FOCA-affiliated teams to follow suit. Manufacturer teams Ferrari, Renault and Alfa Romeo would be going, of course, as well as Ozella and ATS, small teams but fed up of what they saw as British dominance of FOCA. Tolman would also be there, a recent FOCA recruit, part of the Turbo Club, and with a strong desire to qualify for once. That made 12 cars, but 14 was the minimum for the race to count as a championship round. Guy Ligier bore the FOCA teams no love, but elected to join the boycott and spent another few weeks working on the troublesome car. McLaren wavered, with Ron Dennis and owner Teddy Mayer split on the issue, but they decided to stay away, much to the annoyance of Niki Lauda, who spent the weekend hanging around the pits, making it widely known he would have liked to have raced. In the end, the one to break the strike and get the race over its quora was, of all people, Ken Tyrrell. He had just managed to secure major sponsorship from Italian firm Candy after persuading them to drop Tolman, and Imola Ceramica also wanted to see their man Alboreto in action on his home circuit. Ken had also dropped Slim Borgard and signed Brian Henton for the rest of the season for business reasons. Presumably Brian had more money. Mark Sierra was expected to reclaim his Arrows seat soon. Some cynics also suggested that Tyrrell was acting as FOCA's spoiler at Imola, there to cause trouble and protest whatever he could. So, the San Marino Grand Prix would go ahead with just 7 teams present, and those 7 teams arrived on their 4th continent in as many races. All were guaranteed to qualify as long as they set a time, and if Bernie and co were hoping the race would turn out to be a damp squib, they were deeply disappointed, because this was Imola, and the prospects for a Ferrari win were pretty good, all things considered. There was a decent French contingent decked out in Renault yellow, black and white, but the Ferrari red dominated, and the Tifosi were out in their usual droves to watch. Neither had the TV stations been discouraged from covering the race, and many neutrals were tuning in, hoping that the Ferraris and Renaults would take each other out or break down, and that there'd be a surprise winner. Nobody would begrudge De Cesaris, Giacomelli or Alboreto a maiden win on home soil, after all. ATS, meanwhile, had arrived to find no tyres. Their Avons were supplied by UK firm International Race Tyre Services, proprietor Mr. B. Ecclestone, and the transporters had been turned round en route. The Michelins and Goodyears wouldn't fit on the car's rims, and eventually they found some used tyres in a corner of their factory and had them flown out in time for qualifying. The Tifosi had to make do with second best in qualifying, as the Renault team overcame persistent engine troubles on Friday to top the charts on Saturday, with Arnoux and Prost locking out the front row, followed by Villeneuve and Pironi. Alboreto and Giacomelli were next, then De Cesaris and Warwick, Jarier and Fabi, Henton and Winkelhock, Paletti and Salazar. So both of the Italian rookies finally made their debut, and both had acquitted themselves well. Ken Tyrrell lodged a protest on Saturday evening against all turbocharged cars, saying they violated a rule introduced in the 1960s against turbine-powered cars, which isn't the same thing as a turbocharger, and he knew it. The protest was given short shrift by the clerk of the course. Some journalists speculated as to whether the Renault and Ferrari teams would come to some sort of agreement to avoid taking each other off or busting a turbo going too hard, but few of the fans at the circuit believed Ferrari would agree to sit back and watch Renault win at their home track. And so a bumper crowd packed into the Autodromo Dino Ferrari on Sunday to watch this unusual race. Riccardo Paletti, perhaps a little overwhelmed by his first start, stalled his engine at the start of the parade lap and had to be push-started, while Warwick's Hart engine died as they came round to finish the lap, just too far to roll it into the pits and get a restart. So the grid reformed and the light sequence began while poor Paletti was still halfway round, so it was only 12 cars that took the green light, with the unfortunate Riccardo starting his first Grand Prix with a half-lap handicap. The two Renaults both got great starts, with Arnoux going first into Tamburello, followed by Prost, Villeneuve and Pironi, then Alboreto and the two Alphas. Arnoux was quickly pulling out a lead from Prost, whose engine seemed to be having problems, and he was quickly passed by Villeneuve and Pironi, while Henton's Tyrrell had become the second casualty with a transmission failure on his way off the grid. Prost was coming under pressure from Alboreto, but the Tyrrell didn't quite have the power on this fast circuit, while De Cesaris was suffering from a sputtering engine, his fuel pump on the blink. He came in to get it looked at, but nothing could be done, and his race came to an end after 5 laps. 2 laps later it was the same story for Prost, which elicited a cheer from the crowd, while the Ferraris slowly chipped away at Arnoux' lead. Meanwhile, Teo Fabi had found himself in 6th place in the Tollman, with Winkelhock and Jarier in hot pursuit, and the three were putting on an entertaining show for the crowd as they waited for Villeneuve to catch up to Arnoux. Soon the top 3 were close together, but despite the roars of the fans, Villeneuve just couldn't get close enough to make a move, and on lap 22, ironically while the camera was watching Alboreto for a moment, Pironi went past Villeneuve to have a go himself. Teo Fabi, meanwhile, had disappeared into the pits with a dodgy turbo, and after quite some time it was fixed and he was sent back out to see what happened. On lap 25, Villeneuve outdragged Pironi around Tamburello, as Giacomelli became another dropout with an engine failure, leaving just 8 cars running with over half the distance still to go. Then the crowd went wild as Villeneuve pulled out and overtook Arnoux on lap 26. A Renault driver managed to keep Pironi behind him and set about catching up to Villeneuve. Suddenly, on lap 31, he was passed again, and Pironi followed through, dropping Villeneuve from first to third in a matter of seconds. Villeneuve didn't stay behind for long, though, recovering second from Pironi a couple of corners later. So it was back to square one, with Arnoux leading Villeneuve and Pironi as the 3 leaders continued running nose to tail. On lap 35, it was Pironi back in front of Villeneuve, the 2 Ferraris putting on quite the show for the home fans, and still pressing Arnoux as the trio lapped Winkelhock. 6 laps later, Villeneuve was second once more, and Pironi seemed to drop back a little after that, while Villeneuve still chased Arnoux. On lap 44, Arnoux slowed, and Villeneuve was passed into Tamburello. As Pironi also dodged past, smoke was seen issuing from the back of the Renault, another broken turbo. With flames coming out of the back of the car, a frustrated Arnoux pulled off to retire. So now all the Ferraris had to do was finish, but Pironi didn't seem to be in the mood to hold station behind Villeneuve. He still hadn't won for Ferrari yet and quite fancied doing it in front of the Tifosi. He got the lead gifted to him on a plate when Villeneuve ran a little wide at Rivazza, and now it was Gilles' turn to attack. Once again the 2 Ferraris jinked and weaved, and finally, as the pair lapped Salazar, Villeneuve lunged ahead and went into the lead. The Ferrari pit hung out a sign reading slow, and Villeneuve backed off the pace a little, apparently interpreting it as a signal to hold position for the finish, but a couple of laps later Pironi was passed again into the lead. It was a great show for the spectators, but the Ferrari team must have been tearing their hair out, waiting for the pair to take each other off at any moment. Michele Alboreto, meanwhile, was praying for just that, running a solid third. By now there were only 5 laps left, and the 2 Ferraris continued jousting and parrying, and 2 laps later Villeneuve took the lead once more. On the very last lap, Pironi got alongside Villeneuve through Tamburello, then chopped across in front as they entered the Tosa hairpin. With 2 such evenly matched cars, that was the last realistic passing place, and Pironi led Villeneuve home to take his first win for the prancing horse. The Tifosi were delighted with the Ferrari 1-2, and Michele Alboreto was pretty satisfied with his first podium finish in third. Jarier was 4th, Salazar 5th and Winkelhock 6th, with Fabi still running but not classified 8 laps down. Winkelhock was unfortunately found to be 2 kilograms underweight, probably as the result of losing a lot of oil at a long pit stop, but having just closed that particular loophole there wasn't much that could be done and he was disqualified. However, because Teo Fabi hadn't done enough laps to be classified, he didn't inherit the point and nobody came 6th. Gilles Villeneuve was absolutely livid as he got out of his car. He believed that the team had instructed the pair of them to hold position and that he had been, as he put it, betrayed by his teammate. On the podium, he was gracious enough to congratulate Alboreto, but not Pironi, with whom he pointedly refused to make eye contact. In the following days, Villeneuve and Pironi would both give their version of events, and Ferrari rather unhelpfully refused to comment either way or clarify exactly what slow had meant. Hold position and finish, as Villeneuve maintained, or careful but you can keep racing, as Pironi said. In either case, Gilles let it be known that he would never speak to Pironi again. What should have been a fantastic weekend for Ferrari had rather turned to ash in the mouth.